Thank you so much, Congressman Diaz-Balart, for speaking with Voice of America. This year marks the 45th anniversary of the enactment of the Taiwan Relations Act. It is a consensus in Washington that if China invaded Taiwan, it would trigger a domino effect that could be catastrophic for the U.S. Mm-hmm. What are the most important actions the U.S. can take right now to prevent that from happening?
First, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for your time. The relationship with Taiwan has been very special. It is a special relationship. Taiwan is a special place. It's a democracy. It's a beacon of light in a difficult part of the world. And that relationship, by the way, is interesting. The Taiwan Relations Act, which is the basis of that relationship, is based with Congress. It's really a special relationship that Taiwan has had with the Congress of the United States and vice versa. The key is to avoid China doing something stupid, is to avoid China being irresponsible and in trying to intervene militarily with Taiwan. And the way to stop that is to make sure that Taiwan has everything it needs now to dissuade the Chinese Communist Party of China to actually make a decision that would be catastrophic for the region, obviously for Taiwan, for the United States, and for the entire world, and I would argue also for Communist China. And the way to do that is to make sure that Taiwan has the weaponry, everything it needs, so that China understands that trying to invade Taiwan is a very, very bad proposition.
The Biden administration last month approved a package of military equipment sell to Taiwan,
yep.
But some analysts are worried that this may not be sufficient to counter China's aggression in the region. What are your views on it? Do you think military sales to Taiwan are sufficient?
I think military sales to Taiwan have to be done quicker. We have to be more aggressive there. Taiwan wants to be able to defend itself, and they're not asking for U.S. troops. What they're asking is for U.S. equipment, and frankly, they want to buy it. And so if you look at the legislation that came out of the House that we're now currently negotiating in the Appropriations Committee, we actually have for the first time ever FMF, foreign military financing for Taiwan so that they can go ahead and purchase more weaponry. It's important that Taiwan gets what they need as fast as possible. Part of it, by the way, is just that our industrial base needs to be revamped in a way that where it becomes a lot more capable. We do not have an industrial base that can actually deal with if we got into a major confrontation, like, for example, with China. And so the way you disincentivize Communist China from doing something stupid is making sure that Taiwan has all the weaponry it needs to defend herself, to make it very, very difficult, or even better yet, impossible for China to succeed if they try to intervene militarily. In order to do that, we need to do a lot more, not only obviously directly to help send the weaponry, sell the weaponry, and send the weaponry to Taiwan, but we also have to keep up with our defense spending domestically to keep the military-industrial base alive and well, which what we've seen, for example, going on in Ukraine has demonstrated that we're not where we need to be as far as our industrial base.
You visited Taiwan in January,
yeah.
right after their presidential election,
yes.
Right? What is your key takeaway from that trip? What did you discuss there?
Look, Taiwan, a lot of things, but Taiwan is a very vigorous democracy. The press is very aggressive. That's a good thing. It has an aggressive free press. It has obviously three main parties now. There used to be two. Now there's a third that has come up. We made a point of obviously visiting with the president and the vice president-elect, also with the outgoing president, but we also met with the leadership of the other two parties. Because it's important to demonstrate that we cherish and that we love democracy and freedom. But Taiwan is a beacon of freedom and democracy. I was mentioning a very aggressive press, parties that are aggressive. It is what a democracy should be. And so we saw that in all its vivid colors when we were there, which is great. And also the fact that Taiwan, we went to visit, for example, a Navy base. So Taiwan is doing everything it can to discourage communist Chinese to do something stupid, to intervene militarily, but there's more that we can do on our side as well.
Let's move on to U.S.-China relations a little. So it is a bipartisan consensus to see China as one of the biggest geopolitical challenge for the United States in coming decades. What should be the top priority you think that U.S. should tackle right now with China?
We have to be a little bit more serious about understanding that China is a very dangerous player in the world. It is the largest fascist dictatorship on the planet and the wealthiest fascist dictatorship on the planet. It has very ambitious goals. It has, we see the cyber attacks that have taken place in this country that we know have come from communist China. We also know that there have been thousands upon thousands of men, military-aged males coming from China across the southern border, which should frankly frighten all of us. The FBI will tell you that the number of Chinese operatives in the United States is concerning and should be concerning. And so it is an adversarial country. We need to avoid war. But the way to avoid war is to recognize that you have an adversary you need to deal with, and need to deal with, and I think in a very aggressive way, in order to avoid war. And that means utilizing every diplomatic, economic tool at our disposal to treat China as what it is, which is it's a growing threat to the United States and to the world. And you see, for example, in the region, how countries are very concerned about China's aggressiveness, whether it's the Philippines or India or even Vietnam, right? And so there's a growing concern in the world about this aggressive attitude of China, but we need to take real steps to kind of confront that in a way to avoid war.
The House just passed a bill that requires ByteDance to divest TikTok. So did you support this bill?
I absolutely did. It's interesting. It came out of committee 50-0. This is a place where, I mentioned about the Taiwan being a dynamic democracy. Well, here, this is a dynamic place as well with, oppositions and differences of opinion and partisanship. But on that issue, you saw that it came out 50-0 in a total bipartisan way out of the committee. It has strong bipartisan support. And there's also been a lot of misinformation about it. And people say that, that it's to ban TikTok. No, it's basically saying you have to divest from, in essence, being controlled by the Communist Party of China. We would have never allowed during the Soviet Empire the Soviet Union to own one of the major networks in the United States, ABC, NBC, CBS. Why? Because it's a threat to national security. In this case, it's even more dramatic because they have access not only to getting into people's homes, but to actually get information from the American people. And they've been pretty good and very aggressive at doing that. And so TikTok needs to either be divested. That's the least that we should be requiring. And if so, then they can continue to function. But we cannot allow for this to function, getting information from their American people to an entity that is in essence a subsidiary of the Communist Party of China.
You've been advocating for human rights and democracy around the world.
Yeah.
What is the role of human rights that you think can play in U.S.-China relations?
Human rights is an essential part of U.S. national security and of U.S. foreign policy. When you're dealing with foreign policy, there's got to be one overriding principle, always, which is the national security interests of the United States. That's first and foremost. After that, by the way, human rights, I think, plays an essential role. China is not only an adversary of the United States, but it is a grotesque violator of human rights of its own people, of the Uyghurs, it's frankly a very aggressive communist or fascist dictatorship. They're brutal to their own people, and don't take my word for it. Talk to the folks in Hong Kong. And so I think it's important for the United States to lead. I think the world is safer when the United States leads, when the United States shows real leadership. I'm concerned about the lack of U.S. leadership right now. But one of those areas where it needs to lead is in making sure that the world understands that when you're dealing with communist China, this is a very dangerous dictatorship. It's a very aggressive dictatorship. And everything they do is intended to fortify its power, its dictatorship, not to help anybody else.
You're also the chairman of House Appropriation Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations and related programs. What kind of role would you like to see U.S. international broadcasting agencies like Voice of America to play in countering CCP?
The Voice of America has been a key player for decades and decades and decades in that cause of freedom. And in getting real news, real information to people who don't have access to it because of censorship. And so I've always been a strong supporter of it because of that. I think information is key. The first thing that happens in a dictatorship, right, is that they close the ability of the people to get real information, to get real news. And if we can be helpful to have people around the world get real information, real news, not only about what happens around the world, but also what even happens in their own country, I think that is a service to humanity.
Is there any message that you would like to say to our audience in China?
Yeah, you mentioned the State Foreign Operations that I chair, subcommittee. I think what you're going to see when we're done in the negotiations is probably the strongest bill ever as far as confronting communist China. Probably the strongest bill in helping and supporting our democratic ally of Taiwan. And I think it's important that the United States continue to lead the world, not in imposing our will on anybody, but in trying to allow people to reach that ultimate goal, which is freedom, which is liberty. That is the only thing that I think we should all aspire to.
Thank you so much, Congressman Diaz-Balart, for speaking with Voice of America. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.